not completely stranded on Ace King Island right now. We got some, they left us with a raft.
Probably a white belt, and once they cold call, almost certainly a white belt. We face an all-you-can-eat buffet. All the money goes in. Subscribe now to a front row seat for expert hand analysis and world-class cash game strategy. Today, going to be looking at some hands submitted by the Wolves where Ace King ends up being Ace King. They don't improve. They don't make any pairs. They don't make any full houses. There's pretty much no value to be had. So have to, make it with our own guile and wily strategies post flop to outthink and outmaneuver our opponents. And this situation is one that I believe you, the listener, the viewer, is probably more familiar with, and especially feels a lot more painful. You put a lot of money in the pot with Ace King, and you come up empty-handed. There's no pair. You have no pair, nothing really to work with, and don't know what to do. So today we're going to try to give you some advice on that front. John, you ready to rock and roll?
Yep, I hate this spot too. Feels so unfair, man. Such a good hand. Put in all this money pre-flop, and then they just leave us on Ace King Island
It's
by ourselves.
Yeah, Ace King Island. So hand number one, we have the button opening to $25. Our hero three bets to 110 from the small blind. The button calls. Flop is Jack 10-3. So we're not fully empty-handed in this situation. We do have a gut shot with some overcards. We do not have a pair, though. There's 230 in the pot. Villain appears to be a reg, the main antagonist, and that's going to play a role in all the hands today, the profile of the villain and the situation. So stay tuned to, see some hands that are played against, at least one hand that's played against a white belt. So what do you think on the flop here? Jack 10 tray, 230 in the pot, 895 behind. You got Ace King high.
Yeah, like you said, not the best. This isn't like what I was praying for, but hey, this isn't, we're not completely stranded on Ace King Island right now. We got some, they left us with a raft
Yeah.
to get off, so to speak.
You still have a little bit of a prayer left. It's
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
still
And that
time.
gut shot, two overs. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I'm starting out with a C bet here. Really, I think this is like one of the that's a pretty nice candidate for a hand to C bet just because of how many ways it has to improve on future streets. It has some nice blocker properties in the sense that we block hands like Ace Jack and King Jack that are almost always going to appeal to three bet button versus small blind. So we block some of their strongest hands. So yeah, I'd be starting out with a C bet here. Not too picky about what the wolf strategy should be here. I think you can start out with have a C bet strategy that starts out with third. I think you can have a strategy that starts out with half, but definitely want to start out with bet. And I also forgot to mention that we can, immediately start putting some of their bluff catchers in, in a spot where they're either indifferent or maybe just start folding here, right? Hands like pocket fours, pocket fives, pocket sixes, all hands that are better than Ace King that are now facing two overcards. Not only that, but like facing two overcards in a situation where like a lot of our bluffs on the flop are going to have really good equity versus pocket sixes and
Right.
pocket eights, all that stuff.
Even Ace King has, 40% equity or so facing, versus like pocket four. So in a best case scenario for them, or in a really good scenario for them, they're only a 60% favorite. And in a really bad scenario, they're, 95% underdog. So pretty tough. Yep. Our hero is ahead and bets half. Villain calls. So prayer not answered on the turn. The tray pairs, so bottom pairs on the turn. Jack 10 tray. There's now a backdoor spade draw. 458 in the pot. What do you think?
I think I'm just going to continue barreling here with Ace King. Like one of the things that I'm thinking about too is here is that like the three is essentially a brick in this spot. I don't think it really changes very much. Maybe the button peels ace three suited, but even that is, sometimes getting four bet, sometimes getting folded. So there's already some discounting of ace three pre-flop once they just call. Again, we still have a hand that has lots of ways to improve. And yeah, check. Like it's a hand where I really want to realize my equity, and I think the best way to realize my equity with this exact hand is just to continue betting instead of checking, facing a small size potentially, and check calling, and then kind of not being sure whether you should donk certain rivers or something like that because what hands are how many hands are going to bet an ace river or a king river.
Queen
And
River.
again, yeah, queen river. And again, I think we can just continue putting pressure on, like it's not unreasonable for the button to peel even half pot with some of their pocket pairs that are below a 10. And I think all of those pocket pairs will almost certainly fold on the turn. So there still is a kind of a potentially large target for us to target with ace king high.
Cool. I agree. Our wolf bets half pot, and villain does fold. They end up folding a gut shot that we have dominated, but I'm actually okay with this result. It's not the end of the world with ace king. Villain folded a worse hand, but again, as you mentioned, hero gets to realize all their equity, and I think that's pretty nice.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I find myself talking about a lot about in coaching sessions is that it's okay to fold out worse hands if you have a hand that can't check call when they decide to bluff, right? And the worst
Yeah.
hands, if they are almost certainly bluff on brick runouts, then it's actually fine to fold them out, even though you're technically folding out a worse hand because of the fact that you won't be able to check call the future street.
Nice. So now we move on to hand number 2. So we have a reg who opens minimum from low jack. Our hero 3 bets to 9 big blinds from the small blind to $45, and low jack calls. Effective stack is 466, and there is $95 in the pot. Flop is 6-4 deuce rainbow. Any thoughts on this board? This is Ace King Island for sure.
You go first this time. This one's tough.
Yeah, I think I checked this board. I find it villains. We don't really have much of a target for small pairs. I don't think any of those hands are going to fold out. The hands that we do fold out, we block some of them. King, queen, king, jack, king 10. I think we could get called by ace high, but it's going to be pretty tough going. So we need to bet the flop and then check down. So I think on this board, I just check and start by playing a check call line, and maybe hope that the flop checks through and we can get a chance to over realize our equity. So here I'm on team check on 6-4 deuce. Yeah, that's my thoughts.
Yeah, I'm with you. My way of approaching these low flops is that I'm going to be much more selective about the hands that c bet, given just our very low connectivity with this board. We basically only have over pairs that can value bet this flop, whereas on the jack 10 board, we have over pair sets, top pair, all that kind of stuff, bluffs with good equity, whereas here we don't have any bluffs with good equity. So if I was going to pick a bluffing range here or a c betting range that wasn't over pairs, I think it would certainly have to include some sort of backdoor flush draw. So given that we have ace king offsuit, all of these are just going to be checking 6-4 deuce rainbow.
Cool. And I think, maybe some of the targets that we have are ace X of diamonds. If we did bet, we had the ace of diamonds, that's the suited ace that doesn't have a backdoor flush draw. So doesn't help us. Flop does go check. So happy day there. Turns the 8 of clubs. So we have the king of clubs. So we do block. They're king, queen, king, jack, king 10 of clubs. Now there's $95 in the pot. Since it's my turn to go first, I would just continue checking and probably be hoping to check down and just beat ace queen, ace jack, ace 10, as well as maybe some suited broadways. But I think on the turn after the flop checks through, I'm definitely going to be inclined to call a bet. Villain picks up draws with 9-10 backdoor clubs, and they can just start blasting away facing double check. So I would check here with the intention of calling a bet.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah, I think you're totally right that once they see us double check, they can, they have some obvious bluffs to pick from, but they could just start blasting with stuff, realizing that our double check range is probably going to include a lot of hands like this. And so they want to, maybe they think that we start folding ace king on the turn, and sort of the counter to someone who's going to over bluff this turn is to just check call, even with sort of your worst bluff catchers or even your unpaired bluff catchers like ace king and ace queen high.
Nice. So we check, villain bets about 2/3, and hero goes ahead and calls. So wolf is on the same wavelength. River pairs the board, so the 6 of hearts. Our hero checks, and villain hero's got 398. Behind, we face an all-you-can-eat buffet. All the money goes in by villain. They overbet 2x on 8664 deuce, no flush draw available.
I'm glad it's your turn to go first.
Oh yeah, it's my turn to go first. So, value hands, I think that villain could have maybe a hand like pocket tens, maybe a hand like pocket nines. Eight's full, clearly going to be taking this line. But it's very thin, right? Like, I guess like jacks could now be pretty happy going for value, facing double check and then us checking the river. So yeah, like I don't think they have a super robust value range, and I would probably be bluff catching here on the river, just because it's very, very easy for them to over bluff, and due to the fact that they just have a lot more combos of unpaired hands than they do boats and overpairs. So like my tendency here would be to bluff catch, but I think it's probably pretty close.
Do you have any hands that are better than ace king that you take this line with? Like, are you ever trapping hands like aces and kings, like double
Probably,
trapping hands like aces and kings?
yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. Maybe if I 3-bet like 7-8 suited or something like that, that hand could be, technically better than ace king, and it's gonna have a decent blocker property where it blocks eights full. But yeah, this is the problem is, like, when we take this line and we call down with ace king high, we're pretty much check calling down with like everything, right? Like, it's really difficult for us to take this line with a hand that we're not calling the river bet with. So like, we really, 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 really need villain to be over bluffing here in order to just, kind of call this every single time. Otherwise, we need to like sprinkle in some kind of mix where sometimes we call ace king, sometimes we don't call ace king, sometimes we call ace queen, sometimes we don't call ace queen.
Yeah. It does feel like a spot, given that when they start out with flop check, that they could very easily be over bluffing. Some of the overpairs that you mentioned, I think, like, could just start out by floating the flop. Hands like pocket queens, pocket jacks, some of their stronger overpairs. Maybe all of their overpairs just, start floating the flop. So I think, like, yeah, I'm kind of in your camp where once they start out with flop check and we check call the check call the turn, I am likely just gonna go off the assumption that they are it's really, really easy to overbluff this spot, and just I don't think I would mix with a hand like ace king and just be pure calling down, and
Hold on to your
sometimes getting
butts.
stacked by some of their overpairs that are going thin, but hopefully just picking off a whole bunch of hands that need to bluff. I mean, it's so easy to find them, right? There's so many suited broadways, so many, not even non-suited broadways, 10-9 suited ace X, like a hand like ace 5, ace 3 suited, some of the ace wheel hands that
Nice.
appeal to 3-bet. So
Hero does call, and if you want to know whether we won or lost, then you probably need to click the like and subscribe button. I'm just kidding. You're gonna find out whether we win or lose either way, but it would be nice if you click the like and subscribe button. I would be a fan. Villain turns over the
boom.
king queen of spades, so we did find one of the suited broadways that did bluff. So no real way to know whether or not villain's over bluffing here, but this is a pretty good signal, I think, that villain showed up with the king queen of spades. Kind of an interesting hand to show up with too, considering they're like blocking ace king and ace queen, which is probably the two hands that they're mostly targeting when they take this line. So not super impressed by villain's hand selection there. Hand number 3. So this will be played at 1K no limit, so 510. The button opens at $25. Small blind makes it 110. That's the hero with the ace king of spades. The big blind, who's about a 50 big blind stack, probably a white belt, and once they cold call, almost certainly a white belt, flats, and the button folds. So now we have ace king of spades out of position, 245 in the pot. Villain has 390 behind. SPR is about 1.5. Queen 8-8 with one spade. So a little bit of a prayer, but not very much. What do you do?
Easy spot for me. Given this SPR, I am in team bluff catch mode. So I'm definitely going to be starting out with check here. Really don't want to be only narrowing down villain's range to hands that are better than ace king. And I think that's what happens when we start c-betting this board. I think when we check here, especially someone who is playing 50 big blinds and cold calling 3-bets is going to have no problem finding enough bluffs on this board texture. It'd be really nice for them to just start jamming hands that we have dominated. Maybe they peel with hands like ace jack suited, ace 10 suited, king jack suited, king 10 suited, those types of hands. Maybe they even go as far down as hands like 6-7 suited. Not to say that they don't have value in the spot. I think they could certainly, if they can have 6-7 suited, they can certainly have 7-8 suited. If they can have ace jack, they can certainly have ace queen and king queen. And that's like the part of the range that I'm okay with losing to. But I think it's just really important here to give them an opportunity to put it in with hands that are, in really bad shape versus ace king. So I would start out with check here, and already on the flop, I am struggling to see a future where I fold this hand.
Yep, I agree completely. And, tying this back into hand number one, where we flopped a gut shot and opted to bet and then bet the turn, with a lower SPR versus a different profile of opponent, I think ace king high here turns into a bluff catcher as opposed to a bluff like in the first hand. So I agree with everything that you said. Wolf checks, happy day. The white belt checks behind, turns to 7 of clubs. So queen 8-8-7 with the queen 7 of clubs. I'm guessing this doesn't change your approach.
Still checking, still check calling.
All right, so Wolf does check. Villain bets half pot. Pretty slam dunk call. Hero calls the turn following what we presume to be the plan of the Wolf. River's a deuce of spades, so about as bricky as they can come. Hero checks again, and our friend puts the money in, 269. Wolf calls, and villain shows up with the 9-10 of spades. So busted open ender on the turn, and Wolf stacks them for a nice $1,000 pot. Again, I'm pretty proud of the way the Wolves have played in these submitted hands this week. And yeah, so here we have ace king was a bluff catcher. In the first hand, ace king was a bluff. So good episode this week.
Yeah, it's interesting that there's so many different ways to treat your ace king, even after you whiff the flop, right? Like, we've seen ace king, you whiff the flop, and sometimes it's better to treat it as a bluff. And in the last two hands, it's actually better to treat it as a bluff catcher. And I'm guessing like one of the things that gets overlooked a lot of the time is using your ace king as one of your better bluff catchers, instead of, just treating it as like a check fold or just as a hand where you feel tempted just to blast off every single time you whiff the flop. So yeah, really cool to see that there's different ways you can play ace king after you completely break the flop after 3-betting.
Yeah, and if you'd like to see us break down more ace king hands in the future, which I have to imagine we will, click the like and subscribe button. And if you have any questions about today's episode, leave us a comment down below. Mr. Jonathan, I don't have anything else this Tuesday.
See you next week.
See you next Tuesday.
This is Tactical Tuesday on Chasing Poker Greatness with your hosts, Brad Wilson and John Chai. Coach Brad approved. Are you a lone wolf searching for the ultimate pack? The CPG Wolf program is a close-knit brotherhood hell-bent on one thing only: chasing poker greatness. Powered by bleeding-edge wolf strats and led by Coach Brad and his lieutenants, CPG Wolves are systematically prepared for almost any spot they'll encounter on the green felt. If you want to plug into an elite team and have a step-by-step game plan to realize your full poker potential, you can apply at cpgwolves.com. Space is limited, and the pack is only as strong as its weakest member. So only the hungriest, grittiest, and most driven will be accepted into the program. Applications are open at cpgwolves.com.